Commander Lyra Blackwood stood at the helm of the stellar horizon, her fingers drumming against the polished control panel. The massive diplomatic vessel hung in orbit around Celestia Prime, its sleek hull reflecting the purple-tinged light of the alien world's twin suns. Another transmission from the surface. "Commander," Lieutenant Reed announced, his voice tight with tension. "The Celestians are insistent about meeting you specifically." Lyra nodded, her dark eyes fixed on the swirling clouds below. Earth's first contact with an advanced civilization, and somehow she'd ended up as humanity's representative. All because she'd been the one to decrypt their initial message. "Put it through," she ordered, straightening her midnight blue uniform. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Sovereign Faxer. Like all Celestians, his skin held an opalescent sheen, and his eyes were entirely silver, without pupils. The elaborate crown of crystalline structures floating around his head marked him as their ruler. "Commander Blackwood," his voice resonated with harmonic undertones, "we grow weary of delays. Your presence is required for the alignment ceremony. Sovereign Faxer, with all due respect, we still don't fully understand what this ceremony entails. As humanity's representative." "The stars have aligned," he interrupted. "The prophecy speaks of a visitor from the young world, one who will bridge our civilizations. You decoded our message. Only you could have done so. The time is now." Lyra suppressed a sigh. After 3 weeks of orbital diplomacy, she still couldn't tell if the Celestians were truly mystic or just had a flair for the dramatic. Either way, Earth's counsel had been clear: establish peaceful relations at any cost. The Celestians' technology was centuries ahead of humanity's. "Very well," she conceded. "I'll take a shuttle down within the hour." The Sovereign's silver eyes seemed to glow. "Excellent. And Commander, come alone." The transmission cut off, leaving Lyra with an uneasy feeling in her stomach. "Commander," Reed stepped forward, concern etched on his features. "The Council's orders don't require you to take unnecessary risks." "No," she agreed, already heading for the shuttle bay. "But they did task me with making this work. Sometimes that means taking a leap of faith." The descent through Celestia Prime's atmosphere was smooth, the shuttle's advanced shielding handling the planet's intense magnetic field. As they broke through the cloud layer, Lyra caught her breath. The Celestian capital stretched below her, a masterpiece of crystalline architecture that seemed to grow straight from the planet's surface. Towers of impossible height twisted toward the sky, connected by bridges of pure light. The shuttle touched down on a landing platform that materialized beneath it, the surface shifting from transparent to solid on contact. A delegation of Celestian guards waited, their armor appearing to be made of living metal that flowed with their movements. "Commander," the lead guard bowed slightly. "I am First Sentinel Jurex. Please follow me." The walk through the palace was a lesson in alien aesthetics. Walls shifted between solid and transparent, revealing glimpses of gardens where plants moved with apparent intelligence. The air itself seemed to sing with subtle harmonies that changed as they moved. They entered a vast chamber where hundreds of Celestians stood in concentric circles around a central platform. Sovereign Faxer waited there, and beside him stood a figure that made Lyra stop mid-stride. The Celestian woman was clearly younger than the others, her opalescent skin holding a hint of azure. The crown of crystals around her head was smaller than the Sovereign's, but no less impressive. But it was her expression that caught Lyra's attention, a mixture of curiosity and rebellion that seemed startlingly human. "Commander Blackwood," Faxer's voice filled the chamber. "May I present my daughter, Princess Venna." Venna stepped forward, moving with liquid grace. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones that made Lyra's spine tingle, "I studied your Earth customs extensively. Shall we greet each other properly?" Before Lyra could respond, Venna extended her hand, not in the traditional Celestian greeting of crossed arms, but in a distinctly human handshake position. Later, Lyra would wonder if she'd seen the flash of triumph in Venna's eyes, the subtle smile that curved her luminescent lips. But in that moment, operating on diplomatic instinct and years of training, she did what any human would do. She reached out and shook the princess's hand. The chamber erupted in a cascade of harmonic tones, so powerful that Lyra's teeth vibrated. The crystalline structures around Thaxer's head flared with light, and every Celestian in the room dropped to one knee. "It is done." Thaxer's voice carried notes of both satisfaction and amusement. "The prophecy is fulfilled. Commander Lyra Blackwood of Earth has accepted the hand of Princess Venna in marriage." The silence that followed Thaxer's proclamation lasted precisely 3 seconds before Lyra found her voice. "I'm sorry. Marriage." She dropped Venna's hand as if it had burned her. "There must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Venna said, her silvery eyes dancing with amusement. "In Celestian culture, accepting a formal hand greeting from royal family members constitutes a binding betrothal. Surely, in your extensive research of our customs, you came across this." The subtle emphasis on extensive research made Lyra's eyes narrow. The princess had played her perfectly, using Earth's own diplomatic protocols against her. "Your Highness," Lyra addressed Thaxer, keeping her voice steady. "While I'm honored, surely there are procedures, diplomatic channels." "Of course," Thaxer interrupted. "The 3 trials must be completed before any royal union. It is tradition." A wave of his hand created a holographic display in the center of the chamber. 3 symbols appeared: a spiral of light, a crystalline structure, and what appeared to be a constellation. "The trial of resonance," he began, "where you must harmonize your consciousness with our sacred crystals. The trial of integration, where you prove your ability to adapt to Celestian biology. And finally, the trial of stars, where your true intentions will be revealed." Lyra felt a headache building behind her eyes. "And if I refuse? Then Earth's hopes of diplomatic relations with the Celestian Empire die here," Thaxer said simply, "along with any chance of accessing our technology, including our medical advances, FTL drive systems, and planetary defense shields." The chamber's harmonics shifted to a lower frequency, making Lyra's chest tight. She glanced at Venna, who watched her with an unreadable expression. "You planned this," Lyra said quietly. "I chose you," Venna corrected. "There's a difference. The prophecy spoke of a bridge between our worlds, but I selected how that bridge would be built." "Why?" "Perhaps you should complete the trials and find out." Venna stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Unless you're afraid, Commander." The challenge in those silver eyes stirred something in Lyra she couldn't quite name. Pride, certainly. Curiosity, definitely. And something else, something that made her pulse quicken. "When do we begin?" The trial of resonance took place in a chamber deep beneath the palace. A single crystal, tall as Lyra, and pulsing with inner light, dominated the space. "The sacred crystal responds to thought patterns," Jerex explained. "To succeed, you must align your consciousness with its frequency. Few non-Celestians have ever managed it." "Encouraging," Lyra muttered. She approached the crystal, its surface reflecting her determined expression. "Most attempt to force their thoughts onto the crystal," Venna said, watching from the chamber's edge. "That tends to end poorly." "How poorly?" The last candidate's mind was temporarily reversed. He spent 3 days speaking backwards. Lyra shot her an exasperated look. "Now you tell me." Venna shrugged, the motion making her crystalline crown shimmer. "You didn't ask." Taking a deep breath, Lyra placed her hands on the crystal's surface. Immediately, her mind filled with alien thoughts and patterns. Mathematical sequences she couldn't follow, concepts that seemed to fold in on themselves, and through it all, a steady pulse like a heartbeat. She tried to focus, to impose order on the chaos, but the patterns slipped away. Her head began to pound. "Stop fighting it." Venna's voice seemed to come from far away. "The crystal doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to be understood." Understanding. Lyra forced herself to relax, to stop trying to make sense of what she was experiencing. Instead, she let the patterns flow through her, like watching a river without trying to change its course. Slowly, the chaos began to resolve itself. The mathematical sequences weren't meant to be solved. They were music, the underlying harmonics of Celestian consciousness. The folding concepts were their way of perceiving multiple dimensions simultaneously. And a heartbeat. Lyra's eyes snapped open as realization struck. The crystal wasn't trying to communicate with her. It was trying to dance. She laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber, and let her consciousness move with the crystal's rhythm. The patterns shifted and swirled, no longer fighting against her, but moving with her, like partners in an elaborate waltz. The crystal began to glow, its light synchronizing with her heartbeat. The harmonics in the chamber rose to a crescendo, and for a moment, Lyra understood the Celestians in a way no human ever had before. Then the connection faded, leaving her gasping but exhilarated. "Remarkable," Jerex breathed. "The crystal actually sang for you." Lyra turned to find Venna watching her with an expression of genuine surprise, and was that admiration. "You understand now, don't you?" the princess asked. "Why I chose you. I understand that your people experience the universe as an endless dance," Lyra replied, "and that you're looking for someone who can keep up." Venna's lips curved in a smile. "The trial of integration begins tomorrow. Rest while you can, Commander. You'll need it." As Lyra followed Jerex back to her quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just passed more than one test, and that maybe, just maybe, this forced betrothal wasn't as simple as it seemed. High above, Celestia Prime's twin suns painted the crystal spires in shades of purple and gold, while somewhere in the palace, a princess planned her next move in a dance that had only just begun. The trial of integration began in a laboratory that looked more like a cathedral. Towering columns of living metal pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while floating displays showed complex molecular structures that shifted and evolved in real time. "The challenge is simple," Chief Geneticist Nira explained, her silver eyes fixed on various readouts. "Your human physiology must accept and integrate with a small amount of Celestian genetic material." "Simple," Lyra echoed dryly. "Just a little casual genetic modification. What could go wrong?" "Death, molecular dissolution, permanent transformation into a quantum singularity," Nira listed cheerfully. "But Princess Venna seems confident in your adaptability." Speaking of the princess, Venna stood nearby, unusually quiet as she studied the proceedings. There was tension in her shoulders that Lyra hadn't seen before. "You're worried," Lyra observed. "This trial has the highest failure rate," Venna admitted. "Our biology is complex." Before Lyra could respond, warning klaxons blared through the facility. Red light flooded the chamber as security barriers slammed into place. "Containment breach in the royal vault," a voice announced over the comm system. "Unknown hostile elements detected." Venna's crystalline crown flared with energy. "The vault. But that's impossible unless—" Her eyes widened. "The purists. They're making their move." "The who?" Lyra demanded, but Venna was already moving, her hands dancing through holographic controls. "A faction that opposes any interaction with non-Celestians. They've been quiet for decades, but this betrothal—" She cursed in her musical language. "They're trying to access the ancestor crystals, which are the source of our genetic legacy. With them, they could rewrite our entire species, purge any possibility of integration with other races." Venna's voice hardened. "And they're using my trial as a distraction." Lyra was already moving. "Where's the vault?" "You can't possibly." Venna started, then stopped as understanding dawned. "This isn't your fight, Commander. I'm currently genetically bonded to your species, standing in a lab full of volatile materials, while revolutionaries try to rewrite your civilization's DNA." Lyra checked the charge on her pulse pistol. "Pretty sure that makes it my fight." A small smile curved Venna's lips. "The vault is 40 levels down. The security systems are lethal to non-Celestians. Then I guess you'll have to keep up." Lyra grinned. "Unless you're afraid, Your Highness." They moved through the facility like dancers in a deadly ballet. Vena's control over Celestian technology complemented Lyra's tactical training perfectly. When security fields blocked their path, Vena's crystalline crown pulsed with override commands. When purest forces appeared, Lyra's combat skills cleared the way. The genetic integration is progressing faster than expected, Vena observed as they descended. Your cells are adapting to our markers. Is that why I can suddenly understand the harmonic patterns in the walls? Among other things. Look out! A beam of pure energy sliced through the air where Lyra's head had been. She rolled, coming up firing, while Vena gestured sharply. The corridor's walls rippled, crystalline spikes erupting to trap their attackers. Nice trick, Lyra panted. The palace responds to royal commands, though it seems to like you too. They reached the vault level to find chaos. Purest forces had breached the outer doors, and the air crackled with energy discharges. At the center of it all, a tall Celestian in ornate armor was removing glowing crystals from a central pedestal. High Commander Relix, Vena's voice cut through the battle noise. Step away from the ancestor crystals. The commander turned, his silver eyes cold. Princess, I had hoped to complete our work before you arrived. This disruption of our genetic purity cannot be allowed. By disruption, you mean me. Lyra stepped forward, noting how the crystals in the room hummed in response to her presence. A human who presumes to join the royal line, who would dilute our sacred bloodline with primitive DNA. Relix sneered. You are an abomination. She is the future, Vena countered. The prophecies spoke of change, of evolution. You cling to stagnation and call it purity. The prophecy is what we make of it. Relix raised the crystals, and I choose to make it pure. Energy exploded from the crystals, but something strange happened. Instead of destroying them, the power seemed to flow into Lyra, resonating with the Celestian genes now integrated into her system. The harmonic patterns she'd been sensing suddenly snapped into focus. Without thinking, she reached out, not with her hands, but with her consciousness, just as she had during the first trial. The crystal's song merged with her own internal rhythm, creating a new harmony. Impossible, Relix whispered. No, Vena's voice held wonder. Inevitable. The crystals don't want purity, Relix. They want growth. They want dance. They want. She looked at Lyra with new understanding. Life. The crystals pulsed once more, then flew from Relix's grasp to orbit around Lyra and Vena, their light creating a double helix pattern in the air. The prophecy, Vena breathed. It wasn't about marriage or politics. It was about evolution. The next step in our species dance. Lyra met her eyes, feeling the truth of it in the harmonics that now flowed through her transformed biology. Well, she said with a slight smile, I did promise to keep up with you. Guards flooded the vault, securing Relix and his conspirators. But Lyra barely noticed, too caught up in the way Vena was looking at her, not as a diplomatic necessity or a prophetic requirement, but as something entirely new. The dance, it seemed, was far from over. In the days following the vault incident, the Celestian capital hummed with tension. Lyra stood at a window in her quarters, watching ships move through the purple-tinged sky. Her reflection showed subtle changes, a faint opalescence to her skin, silver flecks in her dark eyes. The genetic integration is complete, Vena announced, entering without ceremony. You're officially the first human Celestian hybrid in existence. Just what every girl dreams of. Lyra turned, then paused at Vena's expression. What's wrong? The purists weren't working alone. Vena's crystalline crown pulsed with agitation. We found communications between Relix and certain elements on Earth. Lyra's blood went cold. Who? A group calling themselves Human Purity Front. They're planning to use our technology against us. Relix provided them with crystal-based weapons designs in exchange for their help disrupting the Alliance. Before Lyra could respond, alarms blared through the palace. The sky outside turned red as defense shields activated. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL. Lieutenant Reed's voice came through Lyra's comm. "Commander, they're Earth vessels, but they're not responding to hails, and they're armed with something new." "Crystal tech," Lyra muttered. "How long until they're in range?" 10 minutes. The stellar horizon is moving to intercept, but the transmission cut off as energy beams lanced from the approaching ships. Where they struck Celestia's shields, crystalline formations began to grow, like cancer spreading through the defensive grid. "They're using corrupted versions of our technology." Vena's voice held horror. "The crystals are meant to create, to harmonize. They've turned them into weapons of dissolution." Lyra was already moving. "I need to get to my ship." "We need to get to your ship," Vena corrected. "This is about both our worlds now." They raced through the palace as more beams struck the shields. Celestian defense forces mobilized, their living metal ships taking formation above the city. But the human purity front vessels had positioned themselves perfectly. Any counterattack would risk hitting Earth's diplomatic ships still in orbit. "They're using our presence as cover," Lyra realized as they reached a transport pad. "We need to coordinate both fleets, but communications are jammed. Then we'll have to do it the hard way." Vena's hands moved through control patterns. "Hold on." The transport beam felt different with Lyra's hybrid biology. Less disorienting, more like stepping through a curtain of light. They materialized on the stellar horizon's bridge to find chaos. "Commander on deck," Reed shouted, then did a double take at Vena's presence. "And, Princess." "Status report," Lyra ordered, sliding into the command chair. 8 HPF vessels, armed with some kind of crystalline weapon system. They've trapped the Celestian ships in a crossfire pattern. One wrong move and the ship rocked as crystal formations began growing across their hull. "Hull integrity at 60% and dropping," Reed reported. "These crystals are consuming our armor." Lyra felt the ship's harmonics changing, becoming discordant, but she also felt something else, the same resonance she'd experienced in the trials. "Vena," she turned to the princess. "The crystals respond to Celestian commands, right?" "Yes, but these are corrupted, twisted. But they're still crystals, still part of the dance." Lyra stood, placing her hands on the command console. "Help me reach them." Understanding dawned in Vena's silver eyes. She stepped forward, her hands covering Lyra's, their hybrid and pure Celestian energies merging. Lyra closed her eyes, reaching out with her transformed consciousness. The corrupted crystals sang with pain and rage, forced to act against their nature. But underneath was the same pattern she'd felt before, the desire to create, to harmonize, to dance. "Everyone else is trying to control them," she murmured. "But that's not how it works, is it?" Through her connection with Vena, she extended her awareness to all the crystal formations, both on their ship and across the battlefield. Not fighting them, not commanding them, but inviting them to remember their true purpose. The effect was immediate. Crystal growths that had been consuming ships began to pulse with new patterns. The HPF vessels' weapons flickered and died as their corrupted crystal cores realigned themselves. "Now," Lyra ordered, "all ships target their engines." The combined Earth and Celestian fleets moved as one, disabled the HPF ships with surgical precision. On the bridge of the stellar horizon, Lyra opened her eyes to find Vena watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "You continue to exceed expectations, Commander," the princess said softly, their hands still joined. "I had a good teacher," Lyra replied. "Someone who showed me that the best way to handle impossible situations is to change the rules of the dance." Around them, the battle ended as HPF forces surrendered, but a new kind of tension filled the bridge, one made of shared looks and unspoken possibilities. The prophecy had spoken of a bridge between worlds. Perhaps it was time to see just how far that bridge could take them. A month after the battle, the Great Assembly Hall of the Celestian Palace hosted representatives from both civilizations. Holographic displays showed the signing of the Earth-Celestian Accord, establishing not just diplomatic relations, but a framework for cultural and biological integration. Lyra stood to the side, her newly iridescent skin catching the light as she watched history unfold. The changes to her biology had stabilized, leaving her somewhere between human and celestian, a living symbol of what was possible. Having second thoughts, Vena appeared beside her, resplendent in formal robes that seemed to capture starlight. About preventing an interstellar war, advancing human evolution, and revolutionizing two societies. Lyra smiled. Not exactly. Though I am wondering what comes next. I believe, Sovereign Thaxer's voice carried across the chamber as he approached. That depends entirely on you two. The hall had emptied, leaving them alone with the Sovereign. Outside, the twin suns were setting, painting the crystal spires in sheets of gold and purple. The prophecy has been fulfilled, Thaxer continued. A bridge between worlds has been built. But prophecies speak only of beginnings, never endings. Father, Vena stepped forward. About the betrothal. Ah yes, his silver eyes twinkled. The handshake that started everything. You know, daughter, there are less dramatic ways to court someone. Would they have been as effective? Perhaps not. He turned to Lyra. Commander, when my daughter first suggested using our ancient customs to forge an alliance, I thought she was being impulsive. Now I see she understood something the rest of us had forgotten. That sometimes the best traditions are the ones we create ourselves, Lyra said, meeting Vena's gaze. Indeed. Thaxer's crown sparkled with amusement, which is why I'm abolishing the traditional royal marriage ceremony. Both women stared at him in surprise. The old ways served their purpose, he explained, but this is a new era. Your union, if you choose to proceed with it, should reflect that. Vena moved to Lyra's side, taking her hand. The harmony between them was immediate, their shared biology creating patterns of light that danced across their skin. What do you say, Commander? Vena's voice held challenge and promise, ready to create some new traditions. Lyra pulled her close, as long as they involve less genetic modification and space battles. I make no promises. Their kiss sent ripples through the harmonic fields of the palace, crystal spires singing in response. Thaxer quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the gathering dusk. Later, they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Construction crews were already at work, building the first mixed human-celestian district, while ships from both worlds moved through the star-filled sky. You never did tell me, Lyra said, playing with Vena's fingers. Why really did you choose me? Out of all the humans you could have tricked into a handshake. Vena laughed, the sound like wind through crystals. Because when I reviewed the first contact recordings, everyone else saw our message as a puzzle to be solved. You saw it as a song to be understood. She turned to face Lyra. You were dancing with us before you even knew what the steps were. And now we write our own song. Vena's crown created patterns of light that merged with the stars above. Think you can keep up, Commander? Lyra pulled her into another kiss, their combined harmonics adding new melodies to the eternal dance of the cosmos. Above them, Celestia Prime's twin suns finally set, but neither noticed. They were too busy creating their own light. In the years that followed, the union of Commander Lyra Blackwood and Princess Vena would become legend, not just for preventing a war or fulfilling a prophecy, but for showing both civilizations that the greatest adventures begin with a single step, or in their case, a single handshake. And somewhere in the vast tapestry of space and time, the universe itself seemed to smile, adding their unique harmony to its endless cosmic dance.